us. Let me begin by saying good evening, everyone, and welcome to this County of Brant virtual public meeting about the Cainesville Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater Servicing Initiative. And thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I know that there's a number of things that compete for your time and your attention and your interest in this environmental assessment project. And of course, your interest in the ongoing vibrancy and success of the Cainesville community and of the county as a whole is much appreciated. Some of you have heard me say this before, but I think it bears repeating. I do a fair bit of this kind of work, and it's my personal belief that people who like yourselves, who take time out of your busy personal and professional lives to contribute constructively to matters of civic and societal interest, are always most deserving of our gratitude and respect. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward, as I'm sure do you, to a productive and constructive session. Now, for those of you whom I've not yet met, my name is Glenn Pache. I'm the head of a firm called GLPI, and it's my pleasure to serve as the independent facilitator for the meeting. So again, it might be important for you to know that I am not an employee of the county, nor am I an employee of any of the engineering consultants retained to assist with the study. The only bias I bring to the meeting, if I can call it a bias, is toward achieving the best result for us all. And that's what I will set out to do. Now, I'll introduce a few others in a couple of minutes, but first let's talk a bit about what it is that we're up to tonight. You'll hear more about this later, but really simply put, the County of Brant is undertaking a study with a view to identifying the best way to provide water, wastewater, and stormwater servicing to meet the needs in Cainesville out to a 2051 planning horizon. And the study, which is a municipal class environmental assessment, will look at and evaluate a range of alternatives for doing so. So tonight, we're focused on sharing information about what the study is all about, why it's being undertaken, the potential options and solutions for meeting Cainesville's needs, the criteria to be used in evaluating the solutions, the study process, and so forth. And by the way, the county has information on these and other topics, which is available and will be available, more of it will be available on the county's website. And you can go to engagebrant.ca. Again, that's engagebrant.ca. The website includes various mechanisms for sharing questions and comments and your views, and I encourage you to go there if you're interested and if you have the time and inclination. Now, we have a number of objectives for the meeting tonight, and they're reflected in the session agenda, which I'll take you through really quickly. We're obviously in the opening remarks component right now. In a moment, I'll provide a bit of information about how you can participate in tonight's online meeting, and I'll cover a few housekeeping items as well. I'll then invite Mayor David Bailey to share some words of welcome. We'll then hear from a County of Brant staff member who will provide some additional context. I'll also introduce some of the other key team members that you'll be hearing from this evening, either as presenters or as people answering your questions or responding to your comments. We'll also have an overview presentation describing the purpose of the initiative and all of the kinds of topics that I mentioned earlier. But of course, more than that, as I mentioned, we also want to invite you to share your questions of factor clarification and any comments you might have, which we will put to our panel of experts. And more about how we'll do that a little bit later, but we will look to address as many questions as there is time for this evening. And to be respectful of your time, we'll look to wrap things up by about 7:30 or so. Now, by the way, some people sent questions in advance of the meeting, and our speakers will try to address many of them during tonight's session. And please note, though, that the team is not getting, I repeat, will not be getting into or addressing any individual property specific questions. Those are best dealt with through other means. Similarly, we will not be getting much into the County of Brant official plan initiative, which is also underway. There is a separate process and separate engagement opportunities for that project. So at the end of the Q&A, the panel Q&A, we'll also talk about next steps and outline the range of opportunities outside of this session that are available to you for providing comments and observations. And of course, the county is looking, as always, to stimulate an informed discussion about a number of issues, and they're very open to hearing a variety of community perspectives. And the county understands and recognizes the importance of hearing different points of view and harnessing the best ideas from wherever they may come. So again, really simply, I see a few people have joined us just in the last minute as I've been speaking. Tonight is about informing everybody about the Cainesville Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater Servicing Initiative, including its current status. It's about sharing information about the Cainesville needs and potential options for meeting them, and the criteria against which the options will be evaluated. It's about providing an opportunity to participate in the process by asking questions and by outlining other avenues for sharing comments. And it's about speaking to next steps and where things go from here. Now, before we go on, a few quick words about the nature of this Zoom session. I know some of you use Zoom all the time. For others, this may be the first meeting in which you have done so. So a little bit of technical information. First of all, the session is being recorded so that the content can be made available post-session to those who were unable to join us this evening. And also, of course, to have a record of the proceedings. Now, for those who have used, or for those of you who have not used Zoom, I'll briefly describe the functionality of this webinar. As an attendee in the webinar, you cannot be seen or heard by us or by anyone else participating. Throughout this webinar, if you have questions and comments, please send them using the written Q&A function. So you can, again, send us your questions using the live Q&A icon, which is typically found at the panel or on the panel at the bottom of your device. This is your primary way to engage with us during this virtual meeting. Again, during this Zoom session, questions and comments can be submitted using the written Q&A function. And again, have a look for that icon towards the bottom of your screen. You might have to move your cursor or hover over it for it to show up, but you should be able to find it towards the bottom of your screen. For those of you who may not have the capability to use the Zoom Q&A function, questions or comments can also be sent to the County of Brant by email. And we have somebody monitoring this live tonight. And the email address that you should use is mark, that's M-A-R-K, .maxwell, that's M-A-X-W-E-L-L, @brant.ca. I'll say that again slowly in case somebody's trying to write it down. If you do not have access to the Zoom Q&A function, which should be your primary means, you can also email questions or comments to mark, M-A-R-K, .maxwell, M-A-X-W-E-L-L, @brant.ca. So again, two ways to share questions: through the written Q&A function within Zoom or through that email address. Our moderators are monitoring both of those, and they will be queuing the questions for me to put to our responder panel, again, later in the session during the question and answer part of the meeting. If you have any technical issues, so for example, maybe you're having trouble finding the Q&A function or something's not going well, you can write to us by emailing evan.morrison. So that's Evan, E-V-A-N .Morrison, M-O-R-R-I-S at brant.ca. Again, evan.morrison@brant.ca. And a technical professional will try to assist you. And by the way, you can adjust what you're seeing on your screen. You can select different views like speaker view, grid view, panel view, all of those different things. Again, you just have to move your cursor around to find that. And you can also, if you hover between what you're seeing as a slide and probably my or other images, you can grab the cursor there. You can move your cursor rather over that area, and then you can use the toggle back and forth to change the size of what you're seeing. Now, lastly, for those who have chosen to dial into the meeting, so in other words, you are using a simple phone, not a computer or web-enabled device, not a smartphone, you'll be able to listen to the presentation, but not share any questions unless, again, you have separate access to that email that I mentioned, or to email so that you can send it to Mark Maxwell. So again, if you have any questions about anything you're hearing in the presentation, or perhaps that's not in the presentation, but related to our topic area, please forward them through either the written Q&A or to mark.maxwell@brant.ca, and do that as they occur to you. Don't wait until the end of the meeting or the end of the presentation. Send them as they occur to you. Again, staff will be monitoring them, and they'll be consolidating the questions and forwarding them to me. If due to time constraints, your question is not addressed this evening, be assured that it will be considered by the County of Brant staff as part of the documentation of questions and comments received as part of the Cainesville initiative. And again, more information will be forthcoming and posted online. Now, I believe we have a number of our esteemed elected officials joining us this evening. I won't name them. I'll leave that to the mayor if he would like to do so, but I will thank them for attending and again for their interest in our topic. I know often councillors are interested in how many people are in the meeting. We've got roughly about 30 in total right now, including some of the project team members. But before I do anything else, I wanted to invite Mayor David Bailey to share some observations and brief words of welcome. Mayor Bailey, a pleasure to have you. Please go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Glenn. You are certainly the most competent person to give us direction that I've ever known. Before you started to speak tonight, I knew how to work Zoom and I knew exactly what I was doing. Now I'm second guessing myself. But I'm always glad to see you here, Glenn, in the County of Brant. You do such a great job. On behalf of the County of Brant, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank everyone for taking the time tonight to be with us, to see the nitty-gritty of how we do the things that maybe don't get to the front page of the paper as often as some of the structures that we build and the things that we obviously are doing in the county. But for those that have been paying attention to the County of Brant, you will notice that we are growing quickly. And this is something that needs to be done in Cainesville so that we can continue to grow the county in the Cainesville area, which is a very highly sought after area of the county. And before I say anything else, I'd like to let you know that Councillor Pierce is on the call from Ward 3 and Councillor Miller is on the call, David Miller from Ward 4, and both Councillor Joan Gatward and Councillor Brian McColman are on the call from Ward 5. That's all I know that are here. There could be others, but on my little list here, that's the only ones that I see in front of me. So as I said, the county is growing leaps and bounds, and these are all the pieces that no one really thinks about when we're doing our pricing and our costing and our available services and all the things that we have to do long before you ever see buildings and streets and lights and all the things that look like growth. So as I said, this might not be the sexiest piece of our business, but it certainly is very important and has to be done. So thank you. And I look forward to receiving the information being brought forward by the professionals. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bailey. And I think as well, I was seeing, if I might add to your list, Councillors Bell and McAlpine as well, just to add those two. Thank you, though, for the remarks. Much appreciated. So let me take a moment now to introduce the team that you will be hearing from this evening, again, potentially as responders to your questions or comments. And I'll invite each of them to quickly say hello so that you can put a face to the name. And we have a number of county staff. Let me introduce a few key individuals. And I'm going to start with Mark Maxwell. He's the gentleman I mentioned earlier when I said that there was someone you could email. He'll be monitoring that for us tonight and looking to forward those questions to me. Mark is a project engineer with the county. And Mark, I know you wanted to say a few more words as well and share a bit of context. Please go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I guess, first of all, our original plan was to be here having this first public meeting a few months ago, earlier than October 2021, that's for sure. But like so many other things, we've been slowed down by the COVID pandemic that we're all dealing with. So thanks for coming. Thanks for your patience in allowing us to get here tonight. And we're excited to be here tonight, finally, in this milestone public meeting. Just to give a little bit of context for this project, the Cainesville Class CA that we're working on now is follow through on the boundary adjustment agreement between the County of Brantford and the City of Brantford. That agreement was finalized in 2016, and it allowed for Cainesville wastewater to be pumped to Brantford into the Brantford wastewater system for treatment. But any municipal project of that nature has to go through the municipal Class CA process to make sure that we're making the right decisions, looking not only at the technical side of it, but the natural environment side, the social environment, and of course the economics. So that's what we're doing here. We're going through that process. And while we're looking at wastewater, that's what triggered this whole thing. We're looking out to the planning horizon of 2051. So of course, we're going to look at water and stormwater as well, so that all those things align to the planning year of 2051. Along with the boundary adjustment agreement, we're making sure that we're being consistent with a couple other county initiatives, including the new official plan that's underway and the transportation master plan that the county is working on. So thank you for attending. Please feel free to submit your questions. We want to get to all of them tonight, and we want to work towards the best solution for Cainesville to support the existing development that's there already and for potential growth in the community. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mark. So let me introduce just a couple of others from the county. Again, I'll invite them to say a quick hello. We also have Rob Walton, who is the General Manager of Operations. Rob? Rob, we're not here.
Hi.
Oh, there you go.
Hi,
ahead.
Everyone. Yeah, sorry, on mute there. I'm pleased to be here tonight and hope to be able to answer any questions as they come up. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Rob. And we also have Jennifer Boyer, who is the Manager of Policy Planning. Jennifer?
Thanks, Glenn. Hi, everyone. Yes, as Glenn said, I'm Manager of Policy Planning, and I see a lot of people I know who are attending tonight. Thank you very much. And as Mark said, this is also a very important initiative aligning very strategically with the county's new official plan. So thanks for attending.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And from a firm called RV Anderson Associates Limited, or RVA for short, and they're assisting the county with this initiative, we have Rika Law, who's a professional engineer and project manager. Rika?
Good evening, everybody, and we look forward to addressing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have other members of the study team who are listening in, and they're available as resources, and they'll be taking notes and so forth. So welcome to all of them. And of course, we have all of you, the members of the public, without whom this meeting wouldn't make much sense. So thank you again for joining us. So in the interest of time, let's move to our next agenda item. And as mentioned, we're going to begin with an overview presentation. And this will be a pre-recorded video narrated moderated by Emily Curling from RVA. And again, that's the firm working with the county on this project. And by the way, the video will be posted to the county's website in the coming days, so keep an eye out for it. It should be there fairly soon. Following the presentation, again, we will get to your questions and comments. So if you have any, please send them in as they occur to you using either the written Q&A function, or again, you can send them directly by email to mark.maxwell@brant.ca. So let's begin with the pre-recorded piece that will run now, and I'll invite the technical team to please play the presentation video.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Cainesville Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater Servicing Virtual Public Information Center number 1, hosted by the County of Brant as part of a Schedule C Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. My name is Emily Curling, and I work for R.V. Anderson Associates Limited, an engineering consulting company that is assisting the county in this class environmental assessment. I will be narrating the presentation today. The County of Brant welcomes you to this Public Information Center so that you may review what we plan to achieve, the study findings to date, the preliminary list of alternative solutions, and the next steps. Please review the presentation materials and provide us with any comments you may have. Your input is important to the class environmental assessment process and will be considered. Staff are available to answer your questions during the question and answer session that will immediately follow this presentation. Thank you for attending this virtual public information center. The purpose of this virtual public information center is as follows: to present an overview of this study, to present an overview of the municipal class environmental assessment process, background of the Cainesville Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater Servicing Class EA, to present and gather your feedback on the problem and opportunity statement, list of preliminary alternative solutions, evaluation criteria for assessing alternatives, and the next steps in the process. The Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, MCEA, process is approved under the Ontario Environmental Assessment Act. It provides the framework for municipalities to plan, design, and construct municipal infrastructure projects. This slide shows the overview of the Municipal Class EA Schedule C process. Although the preferred planning alternatives likely fall under a Schedule B Class EA, requiring phases 1 and 2 only, the county has decided to be more comprehensive in their approach and will be implementing this project as a Schedule C Class EA. We are currently in phase 2 of the process, at the consultation stage. Following this PIC, the team will be evaluating and selecting the preferred planning alternative for the water, wastewater, and stormwater servicing. Simply put, phase 2 answers the question, what are we going to do to address the problem or opportunity? After that, phase 3 will include the identification, evaluation, and selection of the preferred design alternative or concept to the selected preferred planning alternative. Phase 3 answers the question, how are we going to achieve that? Phase 4 is the documentation of the Class EA process in an environmental study report. This report will be made available for public and agency review during a 30-day review period, after which the design and construction of these projects can begin. So what specifically is this Class EA about? The County of Brant is undertaking a Class EA for the community of Cainesville because growth is expected for the Cainesville community. Additional water, wastewater, and stormwater servicing are needed to accommodate growth to the 2051 horizon. The current wastewater treatment lagoons are at capacity. The objectives of this study are to plan for additional water supply, additional water storage capacity, and water distribution. Plan for additional wastewater treatment capacity, additional wastewater pumping facilities, and adequate wastewater conveyance. Plan for additional stormwater management infrastructure and adequate stormwater conveyance. So what are the problem and opportunity at hand? Well, the opportunity is that growth is forecasted in the Cainesville area to the 2051 horizon. The County of Brant new official plan is designating the Cainesville community as a secondary settlement area for industrial, commercial, and employment uses. So to accommodate for future growth in the area, this Class EA will identify, evaluate, and select the preferred water, wastewater, and stormwater servicing strategy and the associated infrastructure upgrades required. The preferred servicing solutions shall comply with applicable regulations to provide an adequate, reliable supply of clean and safe drinking water, adequate wastewater treatment and conveyance, and proper stormwater management. Consider stakeholder comments and concerns, be financially viable, be technically feasible and operationally sustainable, be socially and environmentally responsible. The community of Cainsville is located entirely in the county of Brant, east of the city of Brantford, and 35 kilometers west of the city of Hamilton. The study area for the project consists of the lands contained within the current Cainsville settlement area boundary only, as shown in the purple outline in the figure to the right. Cainsville is considered a secondary settlement area in the draft new official plan, meaning the area is not expected to accommodate large-scale urban residential growth, and growth will focus on infilling, mixed uses along Colborne Street East, rounding out, and development of designated land dependent on servicing within the existing settlement area boundary. The current land use for Cainesville consists primarily of employment lands, some commercial, and rural residential. Most of the area north of the railway is currently developed and designated for commercial and industrial uses. The majority of the vacant employment land south of the railway is designated for general employment uses. The Brantford Boundary Adjustment Agreement focuses on the current and future land uses, primarily as industrial, commercial, and institutional uses. Cainesville is predominantly composed of industries, with approximately 93 residential dwellings. It is estimated that 220 hectares of Cainesville are not connected to municipal water, and 276 hectares of Cainesville are not connected to wastewater servicing. The current non-serviced areas include the residential lands in yellow and the areas in blue, which are currently developed but not connected to municipal water or wastewater servicing. The areas in green are connected to municipal water and/or wastewater servicing. The employment lands in orange are allocated for future development and are not yet connected to municipal water or wastewater. The Cainesville water distribution system is owned and operated by the County of Brant. Potable water is received from the City of Brantford water system, supplied by the city's Holmdale water treatment plant. Based on historical data, the average day demand for Cainesville is 387 cubic meters per day, and the highest historical maximum day demand is 830 cubic meters per day. Based on future growth to 2051, up to 4 times as much water may be required. This was estimated based on similar employment land forecasting from other areas within the County of Brant. A list of water supply alternatives were identified, and preliminary assessment of the alternatives was conducted. A more detailed evaluation will be completed and presented at the next Public Information Center. The preliminary list of water supply alternatives is as follows. Alternative 1 is do nothing. This is an alternative that should always be considered as part of the Class EA process. However, this alternative does not meet the problem and opportunity statement, and therefore will not be considered further. Alternatives 2 and 3 are to find a local groundwater supply or build a new surface water treatment plant in Cainesville to treat water from the Grand River. Alternative 4 is to increase the water acquisition from the city of Brantford. And alternative 5 is to acquire water from another county of Brant water supply system. In a preliminary assessment of the alternatives, alternative 1 does not meet the problem and opportunity statement and will not be considered further. Alternatives 2, 3, and 5 may be feasible solutions. However, they have significant technical challenges and high financial costs. Therefore, these alternatives will not be considered further. Alternative 4 was identified as a feasible solution and was selected as a preferred solution. Cainesville receives water from the city of Brantford via a single water main located on Colborne Street. Smaller water mains branch off to service the community and connect to the existing elevated tank in the area. New water mains will need to be constructed in future development areas and in current non-serviced areas. If the municipal water servicing were to be expanded, the existing water mains may need to be upsized to accommodate higher flows, be replaced due to age, or upsized to improve fire flows. Based on the preferred water supply alternative of acquiring more potable water from the city of Brantford, the following water distribution alternatives will be considered and evaluated in detail at the next Public Information Center. Alternative 1 is to do nothing. Alternative 2 is to add an additional connection to City of Brantford's water distribution system to create supply redundancy, i.e. more than just the current Colborne Street water main. This alternative would include increasing the existing water main sizes as needed. Alternative 3 is to create internal distribution redundancy by connecting new water mains to the existing Cainesville water distribution system, i.e. more internal looping of water mains for increased connectivity with Cainesville's own distribution system, and increase existing water main sizes as needed. For water storage, the community of Cainesville has a multi-legged elevated tank with a usable volume of 1,100 cubic meters located on Ewart Avenue. The existing elevated tank is sufficient to satisfy the current needs. Based on future growth demands, additional water storage is required in the future. A phased approach to increase the water storage infrastructure should be considered to provide flexibility and avoid operational problems before full build-out. The following water storage alternatives will be considered and evaluated in detail at the next Public Information Center. Alternative 1, do nothing. Alternative 2, replace the existing storage infrastructure with a new, larger, elevated tank. Alternative 3, build a new storage infrastructure to work with the existing elevated tank. Alternative 4, jointly build a new storage tank or other storage infrastructure with the City of Brantford for future storage needs. Alternative 5, use the existing storage tank to satisfy current needs and require new developers to provide their own water storage. The graphic to the right shows the viable water storage tank types for the Cainesville area given topography. Cainesville's existing wastewater treatment system consists of 3 lagoons. The wastewater goes into one of the 2 aerated lagoons, which operate in parallel. The lagoons promote settling and the removal of phosphorus. Both lagoons discharge into the 3rd lagoon for further polishing and settling. The treated wastewater is then discharged to the Fairchild Creek seasonally in spring and fall. Cainesville's lagoon wastewater treatment system has a capacity of 250 cubic meters per day. To accommodate future average flow, Cainesville's treatment capacity must increase by almost 7 times. This estimate includes the addition of the future development areas within the settlement boundary and the currently developed areas that are not connected to the municipal sewage collection system. The pie chart to the right shows the current lagoon treatment capacity at 250 cubic meters per day and the forecasted wastewater flows as a result of growth to 2051 at 1,700 cubic meters per day. A list of preliminary wastewater treatment alternatives were identified, and a preliminary assessment of the alternatives was conducted. A more detailed evaluation will be completed to be presented at the next Public Information Center. The preliminary assessment of the wastewater treatment alternatives is as follows. Alternative 1, do nothing. This alternative does not meet the problem and opportunity statement and will therefore not be considered further. Alternative 2 includes keeping the existing lagoon systems operational, but without increasing capacity, and then building a new sewage pumping station, an equalization tank, and a force main to send excess flows to the city of Brantford's wastewater treatment plant. Alternative 3 is modifying the existing lagoons to be the equalization and emergency storage for the new sewage pumping station, and then pump all wastewater to the city of Brantford for treatment. Alternatives 2 and 3 are feasible solutions and will be reviewed and evaluated in detail at the next Public Information Center to identify a preferred solution. Alternative 4 is for the future development lands to provide their own wastewater treatment systems, be it their own private septic tanks or communal packaged treatment systems. This alternative was not considered further since new private septic tanks are being discouraged by the Ontario Building Code when there is a viable option to be municipally serviced. Other communal packaged treatment systems will have to comply with the effluent regulations to Fairchild Creek, which already has limited assimilative capacity and will be technologically challenging to meet. Alternative 5 is to increase the level of treatment of the lagoon system to treat all of the wastewater from the Cainesville settlement area. This alternative would be technologically challenging due to the limited assimilative capacity of Fairchild Creek, and operationally difficult to keep the existing system functional during the upgrades. There will also be high financial costs associated with this alternative. Alternative 6 is to build a sewage pumping station to convey the wastewater to another county-owned wastewater treatment system via force main. For example, pumping to St. George Wastewater Treatment Plant for further treatment. However, this would be financially challenging due to the distance, in addition to the upgrades needed at the receiving wastewater treatment plant to accommodate the additional flows. Therefore, alternatives 4, 5, and 6 will not be considered further. This left only alternatives 2 and 3 as shortlisted feasible options, which were used to determine the list of wastewater conveyance alternatives. Some areas of Cainesville currently send their wastewater to the existing treatment lagoon system, while there are also existing non-serviced areas that are currently using private septic systems. New sanitary sewers will need to be constructed to service the future development areas and the current non-serviced areas. Sanitary sewers typically flow by gravity to a lower elevation location before being pumped to a treatment system. Currently, all sanitary sewers gravity flow to the lagoons. The following wastewater collection system alternatives will be considered. Alternative 1, do nothing. Alternative 2, send all wastewater to City of Brantford sanitary system from independent sewage pumping stations. This means that there will be a new sewage pumping station at the existing lagoon site, and then other local sewage pumping stations in the new development areas that will each independently send the sewage to the City of Brantford sanitary sewer system. Each sewage pumping station will have to have their own force mains, screens, flow meters, testing, and monitoring for compliance with the city's sewer bylaw. Alternative 3, send all wastewater to City of Brantford sanitary system from a new central sewage pumping station at the existing Lagoons site. Local sewage pumping stations will pump to the central sewage pumping station as needed. This differs from Alternative 2 in that all local sewage pumping stations will pump to the central new sewage pumping station at the existing lagoon site. The central sewage pumping station will have the force main that connects to the city's sewer system, along with screens, flow meters, testing and monitoring equipment for compliance with the city's sewer bylaw. Moving on to the topic of stormwater management and servicing, there are specific areas within Cainesville identified as having existing issues related to erosion, drainage, and ponding. Future growth in Cainesville offers the opportunity for new stormwater management infrastructure and improvements to existing issues. The issues identified are as follows and graphically shown in the figure on the right. For issue 1, on the top left corner of the figure, planning is required for stormwater features for future developments north of Colborne Street East. Moving down for issue 2, there is ponding at the intersection of Blossom Avenue and Old Onondaga Road West. At the top center, issue 3 is that there is ponding and high stormwater runoff west of Shaver Street. On a related item, issue 4 is the erosion on the west side of Shaver Street. This also leads to issue 5, where there is erosion of the natural channel that flows to Fairchild Creek, and this natural channel hugs around the existing Wastewater Lagoon property. For issue 6, there is erosion between Blossom Avenue and the Grand River. Finally, for issue 7, planning is required for stormwater features for the future development areas south of the railway. Based on the issues identified, the following alternative solutions were determined for each issue. It is possible that the preferred solution could include one or more of these stormwater management alternatives. For issue 1, regarding the planning of stormwater management for future development north of Colborne Street East, there is alternative A, which is do nothing. Doing nothing means that the natural runoff and drainage will continue to naturally flow based on topography and eventually collect to a natural pond to the northwest area of the Cainesville boundary. However, this would be a case of several different private properties draining to another private property. Alternative B is to provide a stormwater management strategy for these future developments such that the stormwater is properly managed and paid into by properties that are contributing to the stormwater flows. Alternative C is to implement natural drainage features where possible to promote infiltrating the stormwater back into the ground. For issue 2, which is the ponding at Blossom Avenue and Old Onondaga Road West, alternative A is do nothing. There are currently a few properties located in this area that are affected by the ponding that results from the runoff in the nearby area. Alternative B is to regrade ditches to capture the stormwater and convey that away from the properties. Alternative C is to use low-impact development, LID measures, to promote infiltration of the stormwater back into soil. And alternative D is to install storm sewers to drain to a stormwater outlet along Blossom Avenue. Issue 3 is the ponding and high stormwater runoff west of Shaver Street. This is a key issue and has various impacts, opportunities, and consequences. Alternative A is do nothing. Although this must always be considered in the Class EA process, it will mean the continued ponding of water in the area, resulting in high stormwater runoff and erosion of the natural channel going into Fairchild Creek. Alternative B is to increase the stormwater management pond volume at the current stormwater pond location. Alternative C is to convert a portion of the existing wastewater lagoon into a stormwater management pond to contain the stormwater runoff and safely discharge through a properly constructed channel to Fairchild Creek. This option will have to be considered in conjunction with the wastewater treatment option as it impacts the lagoon facility. Alternative D is to create a new stormwater management pond east of Shaver Street and redirect the ponding from west of Shaver Street to the constructed stormwater management pond on the east. Alternative E is to split flows between the existing stormwater management pond and the new stormwater management pond east of Shaver Street or the existing lagoon. Alternative F is to maximize the bioretention area south of Worthington Drive and west of Shaver Street. Alternative G is to implement an added stormwater retention policy to the upstream catchment areas and incentivize on-site retention. This is meant to help reduce the stormwater runoff at the source in hopes of reducing the stormwater ponding downstream. Alternative H is to explore infiltration opportunities upstream of the municipal storm sewer system. Connected to issue 3 is issue 4, which is the erosion on the west side of Shaver Street. Alternative A is to do nothing. If left unattended, over time the erosion could lead to undermining of the roadway and impacts on the private property in the area. Alternative B is to design erosion protection along the road embankment. Alternative C is to move the pipe outlet towards the existing pond on existing property to alleviate erosion by the road. And alternative D is to pipe the stormwater flows and carry them across Shaver Street to the natural channel. On a related issue to deal with issue 5, which is the erosion of the natural channel to Fairchild Creek, the alternatives include alternative A, to do nothing. Again, this is something that has to be considered in the Class EA, but if left unattended, the erosion of the natural channel in this area could result in undermining the existing lagoon facility. Previous slope stabilization efforts have already been undertaken by the county in this area, and more of this will be required if nothing is done to address the erosion issue. Alternative B is to limit peak outlet flows from upstream contributors. This is similar to issue 3's alternative G of having the upstream contributors implement stormwater retention or reduction measures at their property to reduce the stormwater runoff coming to this channel. Alternative C is to implement weirs and boulders along the natural channel to reduce erosion force. Alternative D is to implement soil erosion protection along the natural channel. Alternative E is to stabilize the natural channel side banks with geotextiles, mats, or soil nails. Again, the preferred solution could include one or more of these alternative solutions. For issue 6, erosion along Blossom Avenue due to steep slope down to the Grand River, alternative A is to do nothing. This means not taking any action and allowing the Grand River's natural pathway and erosion forces to continue to act upon the already steep slopes and Blossom Avenue, which is located in the top area of the steep slope. Alternative B is to monitor progress and assess the geotechnical risk to the road. Alternative C is to design erosion protection measures along storm outlets to try to reduce the erosion of the steep slope from the top. Alternative D is to widen erosion protection measures along the steep road embankment, where erosion issues are showing soil instability. Alternative E is to add curbs along the road to direct flows to one storm outlet, and to engineer the storm outlet to a suitable location with the necessary erosion controlling measures. On top of accommodating new development, issue 7 is to plan for stormwater infrastructure needed for future employment land south of the railroad. Alternative A is to do nothing. This means that the county will not be providing guidance on how to deal with stormwater management, but the developers themselves will still need to provide their own stormwater management strategy for their property, in compliance with the required regulations and standards. Alternative B is for the county to pre-plan stormwater management strategies to give guidance on preliminary sizes of stormwater management ponds, the possibility of shared stormwater management ponds, and stormwater infrastructure between different property owners, and to utilize the 2 existing natural drainage outlets. Each of the following alternatives will be evaluated based on the following criteria. For the social criteria, example considerations include ability to allow for future growth under the county's official plan, sensory impacts, including noise, dust, etc., both during and after construction, effects on neighboring properties, effects on the municipality, local businesses, etc., effects on Indigenous communities, land requirements. For the financial criteria, example considerations include life cycle costs, capital costs, operation and maintenance costs, sustainability, and affordability. For the technical criteria, example considerations include compatibility with existing systems, ease of implementation, effects on operations and maintenance, treatment complexity, constructability, ability to meet existing and future servicing needs, complies with regulatory and approval requirements. For the environmental criteria, example considerations include effects on wildlife and vegetation, effects of residual management requirements, effects on water quality and air quality, climate change. For the archaeological criteria, example considerations include effects on archaeological sites or structures, effects on cultural sites or structures. Following this Public Information Center, PIC, the project team will be completing the various ongoing studies, archaeological, cultural heritage, etc., and evaluating the shortlisted servicing alternatives in order to identify the preferred solutions. This will then complete the Phase 2 of the Schedule C Class EA. Further consideration of design alternatives for the preferred servicing alternative will be identified and evaluated as Phase 3 of the Schedule C Class EA. This information will be presented in the second PIC. The next opportunities for public input will include Public Information Center number 2 in winter 2022 and the Environmental Study Report for public review in fall 2022. Immediately following this presentation, shown on October 28, 2021, we will be having a Q&A period where the project team will address submitted questions on the Zoom Q&A function. If you have questions, comments, or want to be added to the stakeholder list to receive future project notices, please submit those to either Mark Maxwell from the County of Brant or Rika Law from RV Anderson. Their contacts are shown on this slide and available on the county website. Please provide your comments on the PIC number 1 material by November 18th, 2021. Thank you very much for your participation in the Virtual Public Information Center. The project team really appreciates it.
Okay, and thank you to the team for the very informative presentation. Much
Hi everyone,
appreciated.
and welcome to the
It was so good, we're going to hear it again. No, we'll pause it for the moment. So again, thank you to the team for the informative presentation. And thank you again to everyone for participating in tonight's session, both for your interest in the topic and for the questions that have already been provided. There are some good ones that are coming in. Keep them coming as they occur to you. For those of you who joined us in progress, you've been listening to the overview presentation from the study team. My name is Glenn Pache. I have the privilege of serving as the independent facilitator for tonight's meeting. So let's move now to the questions and comments. Again, as they've been coming in, as they've been submitted, staff have been reviewing them to identify those that are similar in nature with a view to consolidating them and addressing duplication. So again, in some cases, there has been some consolidation of multiple questions into a single one. So please don't worry if the question posed this evening isn't exactly as it was asked. And again, some people did send questions in advance, and I'll be posing a few of those on behalf of those individuals. If we don't get through all the questions this evening, again, be assured that county staff will be reviewing them and they will be documented as input to the initiative. So let's get to your questions now. And Rob, maybe I'll start with you. As always, there are questions about money and the financial aspects of things. And one of the first questions is, what will be the cost to taxpayers of these various projects? And I know it's early days. I don't know if you can be very precise, but maybe you can conceptually take us through that.
Thanks, Glenn. You're right. We haven't developed all the costs yet, so it's hard to say exactly what they are, but I can talk about where the different pots of money where funding could come for this project. Generally, water and wastewater projects are funded by the people that are connected, and the combination of that and development charges. So that would be the major part of the water and wastewater components of this project: development charges and water and wastewater connection fees. For roads and stormwater, generally in Brant County, this has been taken off from the taxes, and so there would be some contribution for taxes for that. So as we develop the actual cost models, we'll be estimating, what the various components of that would be, and then working on how that would be worked into projects in the budget. And some of these projects would end up being development charges, which aren't currently in the current development charges project file too. So there may eventually need to be or background study, sorry. So there may need to be amendments to that. When would the services be built? Earliest that we're likely any project in 2023 after the EA is done, which would be in 2022. We have to do design then, so that would be the earliest you would likely see anything. Yes, they will be phased. There's no doubt about that. The land south of the tracks would not be serviced until they're developed. So that would be done at a future time for sure. And how we would go about doing the rest of it, we'll have a look at when we decide what the projects are. And then the last one is how to deal with the requests from outside the settlement boundary for services. And Jennifer Boyer will come on and answer part of this too. But generally, service requests from outside the settlement boundary are not considered without an adjustment to the official plan. And I'll let Jennifer answer the rest of that.
Hi there, thanks Rob. That's correct. Through the new official plan, and our draft came to council on July 29th and August 10th. We've had quite a few site-specific reviews, as was asked for one of the questions tonight. And anything outside of the current settlement area boundary for Cainesville is considered a settlement area boundary request. And we've had a couple, and council did debate those, and one especially, and it's gone to the province for review. We are expecting comments from the province in about 3 weeks, so we'll see the results of how our assessment went. So thanks for that.
And Rob, maybe I can, thank you, Jennifer. Maybe I can come back to Rob. There was another question submitted in advance relating to money. And somebody had asked, if Cainesville's wastewater is pumped to the city, how will the wastewater rates be affected? Do you have any thoughts on that one, Rob?
Yeah, so the wastewater rate are the one tier. So
Rob,
the county will do.
Rob, if I can jump in, you're breaking up. Maybe you can turn off your video and we might get a clearer signal from you.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's better. Give it another shot, please. Go ahead.
Okay, I do live out in the country, so we don't have 100% internet, but anyways. Okay, so water and wastewater rates in the county of Brant are one tier, so everybody pays the same rates. So we'll have to, through the budgeting, deal with what the costs are of us sending sewage and collecting water from Brantford, or taking water from Brantford, which we already do take the water from Brantford. And then we will be setting the rates for that in the future. We currently have rates set for the next, well, we set a 4-year rate study. We had a 4-year rate study, and so that was sometime this year. So we've got at least 3.5 years of those rates left. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rob, another question. Again, I think you might be the best person for this one. I think we have some perhaps consultants or individuals who are representing landowners in the Cainesville area. I won't name the specific landowner or parcel of land because we're trying to keep this generic and general tonight. But the question is whether there will be a means of considering some of the landowners or in this case, the client's land within the Cainesville Master Servicing EA study. So are you working with some of those landowners to consider their interests and needs?
Thanks, Glenn. I think that the question is posed is actually from a landowner that's being represented by a consultant outside of the boundary. So
Outside, okay, thank you.
yes. So through this process, we will be talking with the lands within the, we are talking to the lands within the study area, which is the boundary of Cainesville. And what the answer to this particular question is for the lands outside is, if the official plan is amended such that those lands are included, we will consider them. If it isn't, we won't. So I think that's a pretty straightforward answer, and it'll depend on the outcome of the official plan. The official plan, the draft official plan will be done before this study is done. And if it includes other lands, then we'll have to include them.
Okay, thank you.
And consider phasing.
Okay, thank you. Let's get Rika in. We haven't heard from her since I introduced her. Rika, a few questions I think to put to you. I believe you're the most appropriate. First of all, someone is asking, with regard to the stormwater alternatives that were listed, they're assuming that they are not mutually exclusive. Is that correct? Can you comment on that?
Great, thank you for the question, Glenn. So in regard to these stormwater alternatives, they are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Obviously, the do nothing would be mutually exclusive from doing any of the other alternatives. But overall, we would be looking for one or more solutions that would fit in to provide a overall better preferred alternative.
And there were a few questions about the lagoons. And again, Rika, I think you might be best on those. Somebody was asking, could the lagoons continue to be used and all of the extra wastewater from development be pumped to Brantford? So is that possible?
Yep, good question. So that is definitely a possibility. We are looking into that, and we will be evaluating that option as we go into the next phase, which is evaluating all of these alternatives and then coming up with a preferred alternative. So it is definitely something we are considering, as it does help with the phasing of things.
Okay, and another lagoon related question. Somebody was saying, couldn't the lagoon's capacity be increased by discharging the wastewater all year round instead of just in the spring and fall?
Okay, very astute question. So unfortunately, right now, the lagoons are not able to treat the wastewater to the quality that is required for a summer discharge. The receiving stream, Fairchild Creek, as you've heard in the presentation, is highly sensitive. So it can only handle a certain effluent quality. And as such, with the lagoons that we have right now, spring and fall are the times when the quality is sufficient to be able to discharge, versus a dry summer month where the effluent quality would then impact the stream more. So at the moment, unfortunately, with the way the lagoons are able to treat, we can only do it during spring and fall.
Okay, one more lagoon question for you that's come in. Somebody's asking, what will be done to the lagoons if they are in fact decommissioned? What happens to them afterwards?
Good question. So as we've mentioned in some of the slides, there are opportunities to consider using it for other things, such as the stormwater management and using that into a stormwater pond once it's fully cleaned out, and retrofit it to suit that need. Alternatively, it could turn into a equalization tank or a holding tank for the new sewage pumping station that would be constructed in that site. So there are different uses for the lagoon. The land there will not go to waste. And it's just a matter of what are the preferred alternatives for each of these different types of servicing, so that we can get the most out of the facilities that we do have right now.
Are there any potential negative environmental impacts that would come with the decommissioned lagoons? Anything that people would need to keep an eye out for, Rika?
Well, the sludge would have to be cleaned out, but that's something that the lagoons are doing on a regular period, with the sludge needing to be taken out once it is in stable form. But there shouldn't be any sort of environmental concerns with turning that into a stormwater pond, as long as it is properly cleaned out. Overall, the reduction of the effluent to Fairchild Creek would help improve Fairchild Creek. So having a higher level of treatment, let's say going to the city of Brantford for that higher level of treatment, would be an overall benefit.
You mentioned the city of Brantford, and maybe I'll ask Mark Maxwell to come back in here. There were a few questions about the city. Mark, somebody's saying, can you tell us more about Brantford's role in the EA? And more than that, are they providing input to, this Cainesville related project? And do they themselves have sufficient capacity for this and to manage their own growth? So Mark, 2 or 3 questions there about Brantford's role and their capacity. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Yeah, Glenn, thanks. We've been in close communication with folks over at the city throughout this project, and will continue to be as we keep going and then finishing it off. We have confirmed with them that the water demands and wastewater flow estimates for the full build out to the planning horizon of 2051 can be accommodated by the city's water and wastewater systems. And actually, it worked out to be very good timing because the city completed a master servicing plan for their water and wastewater systems just recently, and it does include the projected water and wastewater flows for Cainesville.
Thank you. Let's get Rika back in. Rika, somebody is a 2-part question here, is asking, will they, I'm not sure if they is the county or who that is, but will they be constructing sewers and stormwater servicing wherever the current water pipes are installed? And then they go on to say, if not, where will these services be installed? Rika?
Okay, great question. Thank you, Glenn. So the intention is for the county to service any of the currently developed areas and the future to be developed areas within the settlement boundary with both water and wastewater. So that means any of the areas that do not currently have sanitary sewers, those will be constructed to assist with their ability to connect to a municipally owned and operated wastewater system. Now, in terms of storm sewers, that will depend on our outcome for evaluating the stormwater needs. But again, the county does want to look at it from a holistic point of view, that if we happen to be digging up the roads and putting in upsized water mains and or sanitary sewers in that area, and if it also happens to need storm sewers in that area, be it new or upsized, then that will be taken into consideration at the same time so that you don't rip up the road more than once if we don't need to.
So Rika, let me continue with you. Some process related. Oh, I think Rob wanted to add something perhaps to that, and then I'll go to the next question. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to what Rika had to say is certainly in the industrial commercial area, we intend to put water and sewer to all of the streets and do it over a phased approach, and some as required as development happens. I just wanted to mention the area of Blossom Ave. We certainly want input from the owners on Blossom Ave, the residential areas, to what their needs are. We certainly are going to set up this system so that it can eventually be put over to that area, but we need to see what the needs are over there and really identify that as to when that needs to happen. I'm not sure it's an immediate need, but certainly the input from the landowners over there would be beneficial through this process for us to tell if there's an immediate need or whether it's something that we should be eventually planning for, far out in the distance. So I just add that in there because I think it's a good point of public consultation for the people to give us input on that. Thank you.
Oh, Rob, yeah, thank you for the addition. That's good information to share. So Rika, I'm going to come back to you with a couple of process-related questions. So somebody's wondering, how will the different options be evaluated? How will they be scored? What's the process you use? How do you do that?
Perfect. Great question. So with the evaluation criteria that was mentioned in the presentation, so that includes social, environmental, financial, technical, and archaeological. These will be evaluated against all of those items. The weighting of these particular criteria is yet to be considered by the study team, whether or not they're going to be all weighted equally, or if something's going to take precedence over something else. But that will be in the next steps, and we will be presenting all of that at the next PIC. But all of these will get reviewed in more detail so that there will be the ability to score these against these criteria and then present it transparently to the public.
So you anticipated the second question that had come in. I'll see if you have anything to add. Somebody was asking how much importance or emphasis would be given to the different criteria, whether it's environmental, social, financial, and so forth, and whether some of them might be considered more important than others. But it sounds like you haven't made that determination yet about weighting, but was there anything you wanted to add?
Well, thank you for expanding on that question. So we have not made that decision as a team. However, it is going to be difficult to say one is more important than another because different stakeholders are going to have different views as to what is important. But we will be taking these into consideration as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. Let me get Jennifer back into the conversation. Jennifer, somebody was asking what type of development is or will be allowed in the development lands at the south end of Cainesville?
All right, thanks, Glenn. At the south end of Cainesville, as referred to in the presentation by RV Anderson, is we showed a graphic there. Right now, they're designated employment lands. And the proposed new official plan also designates them as employment lands. So there would be no change. It would be a general type of employment because in the new official plan, we have several designations that allow for various uses. But I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just note to everybody again, keep the questions coming. These are terrific, very on point, very purposeful. We're at about 7:15 now. As I mentioned, we'll look to wrap up no later than 7:30, and we'll quickly recap next steps and so forth at the end. So we probably got another effectively 10 minutes or so for questions, but I'll share a few more that have come in. And I don't know if this is to Rob or Jennifer. It's a kind of quite an interesting question. I'll invite either or both of you to jump in. Somebody is asking, what if the growth doesn't materialize as expected? You know, will you have wasted effort and resources on infrastructure that, you know, may not have been necessary? And I know neither of you has a crystal ball and you know, you don't know with certainty what's going to happen, but Rob, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, I think that this project is quite worthwhile. The lagoons are at capacity now, so we can't do anything with them. So usually you start planning on wastewater projects at 85% of your plant capacity to do upgrades. Now, 250 cubic meters a day is not a huge capacity either. We don't have to hook very many properties up to this to expand that. So the good thing here is that we don't have to, with the options we're looking at, we're not looking at building a plant. We're looking at pumping into Brantford are basically the options and how we might use the lagoon. So the investment here isn't like spending 20 or 30 million dollars on a plant. We'll be constructing some sort of sewage pumping station and then transmission back into the city. So if the growth happens slower than what's anticipated, the initial investment isn't as high as it would be to say build a plant. And then the water upgrades can be phased in as well. The stormwater can be somewhat phased in too by how you do the road improvements and whatever and how you phase that. So I think this project is very feasible, which helps answer that. And the initial cost of a lot of the phases won't be not like building the Paris wastewater treatment plant or the St. George wastewater treatment plant, which are other projects we have to do too.
Great. Jennifer, I saw you nodding, but was there anything you wanted to add?
Sure, thanks, Glenn. And also as indicated in the presentation, this County of Brant Class E8 also aligns with our new official plan, which is a 30-year growth horizon. So we're planning for 30 years, and we know that the market ebbs and flows. We have different market demands over time, and that's why our growth allocations have been put towards that 30-year horizon. We do right now have, you know, significant demand for employment lands, especially serviced employment lands. We do anticipate an uptake. We've also had interest in terms of, certain uses around Colburn Street, one of the main arterials in the county. And the new official plan is looking at redesignating Colburn Street in terms of a corridor. So we've had some interest there. But in terms of growth, we're very well aware of our allocation. And also Cainesville is not going to be subjected to large scale urban residential. So that's what we're planning on. And as shown in the Class CA tonight with all the answers, that's what they're planning for in terms of water and sanitary capacity. So thanks, it was a great question.
Thank you. And I'll go back maybe to Rob or perhaps to Rika, but I think some people are wondering about the urgency here, or how urgent is the situation? Is there any near-term risk of any, or near-term risk to the quality or the quantity of Cainesville's water supply? I think people are probably looking for some reassurance on that front. Rob, Rika, either of you want to jump in?
I can take that one, Glenn, or at least initially. The water service from Brantford to us well meets our needs right now. And really, to expand the amount that we need to do the expansion of the system by adding more customers on. So I don't see any real issue for water if nothing else happens here. And the agreement from the city is to provide us potable water as per the provincial standards as we expand the system. So I don't really see any concerns there at all. The only concern on the wastewater side really is that we are at or near around capacity of the lagoons. And since we're not doing any development out there, that's how we're managing that situation.
Thank you. Rika, anything to add?
I think Rob answered that very well. To assist with the water servicing, the county will be looking at additional water storage, which will help to provide further redundancy. But as it stands right now with the city's supply, that is the best that we're going to have with Cainesville, given the options.
So Rika, before I let you go, another question for you. Somebody has noted that the presentation, or in the presentation, it said that a new local groundwater supply would be feasible, but that there were significant technical challenges and high financial costs, and therefore that option would not be carried forward. Can you provide any additional details about the analysis there? Like, what are the technical challenges that are significant and so forth? And it looks like Rob wants to jump in too. I'm not sure who wants to go first here.
Go ahead, Rika.
Rob, were you answering the previous question or this?
I was going to add to the previous question, actually.
Why don't you finish that first?
Yeah,
Okay,
why don't you
so
do that, Rob? Go ahead, and then we'll get Rika.
If there's any existing, if there's any developers of ICI property here, what they should, one thing they should consider is the amount of fire flow that we provide. And we know that new development often wants higher fire flows than what we currently provide. So if there are developers out there that know that they're going to develop new buildings and they want in excess of, I think it's 59 liters a second that we currently provide. I know we're doing an EA right now in Paris, where at the south end of Paris, we're going to be providing 150 liters per second because of the demand there with the new buildings and the type of sprinklers they have. So it's just one thing that if there's anybody in the line that wants to put comments in their public comments about that, we encourage them to do that, and we're certainly have it on our minds as well too. So, and that's the whole thing about storage. It's really mostly designed around the fire flow requirements. So,
okay, thanks, Rob, for that additional information. So, Rika, what about the new local groundwater supply and the analysis around whether it's feasible or not, and what some of the technical challenges, the financial hurdles are?
Sure. So just from what we can understand with the current private wells that are in the Cainesville area, because of the geology with the clay soils, that actually impacts the ability to get a lot of groundwater. So that is what is limiting us from using that as a municipal supply. As you can imagine, with a private well, you may only need maybe half a liter a second or a liter a second. But with a municipal system, you need a lot more than that. And so there would be a lot of different groundwater wells that would be needed in order to compensate and make up for the municipal needs. And as such, that's why we are ruling it out, because a lot of different municipal wells populating throughout and then having to put a pump house to each of those is where the financial costs and the technical challenges is going to come in.
Okay, thank you. Rika, another question for you, and I think we're down to our last few. The questions are starting to just trickle in at this point, but we'll see if we can shoehorn in a few more. Somebody is asking, Rika, will stormwater servicing be improved in the area of the trail on Papal Road? And they've gone on to say that the trail was closed earlier this year due to erosion. So Rika, can you tackle that one for us?
Okay, thank you. So in our initial review, this area wasn't flagged as a problem, but we'll investigate this and report back to the next public meeting. So we'll definitely jot that down. So thank you.
Okay, and Rob or Rika, again, I don't know which of you is best on this one. Maybe Mark wants to jump in as well. Some people are interested in knowing, regardless of which options end up being selected, as you're building this new infrastructure, are there ways of ensuring that it is done in an environmentally sensitive, environmentally responsible manner? Both the construction of it, and I'm imagining they're also thinking about things like, can you use solar panels on some of these buildings and so forth. So anyway, either of you jump in, sort of what's the state of doing this in an environmentally responsible way?
Great. So maybe I'll take a stab at that first, Rob. So actually in our team under RV Anderson, we have a natural and environmental group. So they have been working alongside with the design engineers in terms of coming up with the solutions of alternatives, and they will continue to work with the team to look at what needs to be mitigated, what are the environmental impacts, and what else needs to be considered as we look into the detailed design, the details of the alternatives that we're going to explore in the next phase. So hopefully that answers your question. So we do have an environmental team to consider all of these as well.
Okay, thank you. And Rob, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that Rika answered that well. Under the provincial legislation for different things like sediment control and whatever, there are minimums that we have to do, and we certainly mostly exceed those in all our construction projects. So I'm not sure what other things that we might implement as we go ahead with strategies for servicing in other ways. We certainly have an energy management plan, and we're looking at climate change, and we're developing new things to do all the time. So it is ever present in our thoughts.
Great. So Rob, one more question, and then we'll go to next steps and look to wrap things up, because again, we're looking to not go later than 7:30, and we want to be respectful of people's time. Rob, somebody was asking about whether there were any planned road improvements in Cainesville. I know road improvements aren't quite the topic tonight, but is there anything you can add on that front?
Thanks, Glenn. Yes, we are considering some road improvements. When we do any servicing of installing new pipes, obviously we'll be reconstructing those roads, because you'll basically be ripping them up entirely to do storm sanitary and possibly water as well. There are some water mains which exist there, which are quite old and need to be replaced as well on existing roads. So, and the other thing I'll just put a plug in for is we're actually working on our transportation master plan right now as well. So that's another project that's on the go. And certainly the intersection of Colburn and County Road 18 or Garden Ave to the north is one of the busiest intersections in all of the county and has a lot of accidents. And we're certainly looking at that in that corridor as to what we need to do differently there. So I think that's the short answer to a much bigger question.
Well, I'll just say again, thank you to everybody who provided questions. They were, again, very on point. Thank you as well to our responder panel for their answers to the questions. Again, your ability to ask questions and share comments doesn't end tonight. I encourage you to go to the website, to contact Mark Maxwell directly. You can email him. We look forward to getting any other thoughts that you might want to share. But again, to be respectful of your time, let's look to wrap things up in the next 5 minutes. And just before I invite Mark to describe next steps and any opportunities for ongoing engagement, again, I want to thank all of you so much for participating this evening. A special thank you to those who shared questions and comments. Again, I'd like to thank all of our elected officials who joined us tonight, not just for their interest in this initiative, but for their ongoing and valued service to the community, which is greatly appreciated. And from my perspective, it's been a real pleasure facilitating this session with such an obviously thoughtful and knowledgeable and articulate group. So I'll be back in a moment to formally wrap things up. But before I do that, let me hand things to Mark Maxwell to again quickly recap next steps and where things go from here. Mark, go ahead, please.
Sure. So I think it was mentioned in the presentation near the end, but just to reiterate, our big picture next steps will be to receive all the feedback from tonight. And over the next couple of weeks, we'll digest that and see how it helps us confirm the preferred solutions for water, wastewater, and stormwater. And then we'll move ahead with looking at the specific design concepts for the selected preferred alternatives. And that's when we come back and present that again at another public meeting, likely towards the end of winter 2022, by the time we have that ready. So that'll be another point of contact where we can interact and receive feedback on the design concepts that get into a little bit more detail for water, wastewater, and stormwater. And then after that, we move forward with developing a final Class EA document, a final report that gets placed out there for public review and another opportunity for public input on the final decisions that were made.
And Mark, am I right in saying that they, of course, can contact you, they can email you, they can go to engagebrant.ca to the website and so forth? Are there any other opportunities for people to send questions or comments post-meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few methods to get in touch with us, and we'll receive feedback at any point, but we specifically want it close to the PICs, close to those decision points, so we get it at the right time. But yeah, you can get in touch by phone, email. Our new Engage Brant tool is we think a huge success with getting in touch with residents and providing that channel for them to submit feedback. So those three are probably the best ways: phone, email, or through engagebrant.ca.
Great, thanks, Mark. So everybody, I do encourage you to continue to stay engaged in the process as things unfold and the project moves forward. So just give me 30 seconds. I'll say quickly, thank you to the various personnel who made this session possible, both technically and otherwise. Thank you to all of you for your participation. Please enjoy the rest of the evening or what's left with it. I will now formally adjourn the session. Do take care, stay safe, and have a good night, everyone.